Hello, everyone. It's Friday, January the 16th, and this is the end of the first week of trading of the trend wheel strategy in 2026. And for those of you who are following along, I thought we'd walk through what we've accomplished in the first week and compare notes. So just a reminder before we jump into everything, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing what I'm doing personally for your interest and information only. Please trade at your own risk. So let's jump in to what we are doing. And if I can find my cursor, I would change to the spreadsheet right there. Okay, so as we see here, we've got four portfolios that we're tracking. One is we have 20 delta, which is a more conservative approach. That is, and we do that on a weekly basis as well as a monthly. And we've got the 30 delta, which is a bit more aggressive, which also trades weekly and monthly. And we're running all four of those in parallel so that you can see how they perform relative to one another. So first of all, for the 20 delta weekly, we had, 8 positions that we put on. And of those 8, they were all doing relatively okay until recently Robinhood had declined a fair bit. And despite the fact that we had a 20 delta, it looked like it was going to close in the money. So I actually rolled this. Actually, I closed it early and opened up the next one. By early, I mean partway through the day today. I closed it at a loss and opened up the next one for next week. I'll talk about that in a minute when we get to next week's. But as you can see here, we started out at the beginning of the week with $939 of cash flow based on the puts that we had sold, and which is a pretty reasonable amount, 0.9% on the basis of a $100,000 portfolio. However, we were only able to keep 818 of that because, of course, we didn't get our full amount on Robinhood, and we closed Palantir a little bit early too because it was borderline. It was looking like it might actually drop below the 170 strike. So I closed it, and so with the profit was 818 total for the 20 delta weekly. And I'll jump over to the 30 delta weekly now, so we can compare the slightly more aggressive version. And here, of course, these are with the 30 delta puts, a little bit more revenue or cash flow generated. We had $1,169 that was generated for the 30 deltas. And here we definitely had both Robinhood and Palantir close below the strike prices. So we were assigned on the shares of both of those. However, what I've done here for tracking purposes is I've used the closing price of the put option here to indicate what the amount of profit was that we were able to capture and keep for the first week. And so as we can see, from the 1,169 that we could have earned, we actually only kept 688, partly because here with Palantir, instead of the 221, we only kept 79 of it. And instead of the 182 for Robinhood, we in fact had a loss of 147. So that netted out to $688, which is still not too shabby. And if we look over here at our portfolio charts, we can see that for the 20-day weekly, that 0.8% on the $100,000 portfolio, that tracks to, after all of 1 week, of course, it tracks to about 41.7% annualized. Whereas the 0.7, the 0.688 on the 30-day the 30 delta weekly, that translates more to a 34.9% annualized. Now, of course, this doesn't mean much after 1 week. What I expect to happen is that over time, the 20 delta weekly, that'll get a lot closer to between 18 and 22%, in my opinion. And most likely the 30 delta will be somewhere between 36 and 42%, barring a long-term downturn in any of our stocks. So that's what I'm expecting to see at the end of 52 weeks. But again, anything might happen. So that's where we are. Let's look at the monthlies. The 20 delta monthly, these are the different strikes, et cetera, that we put on. We are only, of course, 1 week into this. And this monthly is actually going to consist of 5 weeks, not just 4, just because of the way January worked. February 20th will be our expiry date. So here we generated $3,265 worth of cash flow. So that's about 3.2% on a $100,000 portfolio, which is quite good. However, after 1 week, we're tracking to $625 of profit that we can keep. And then if we look over, and that's the 20 delta, of the 30 delta, we have a very similar story. We had a slightly larger amount of cash flow, $4,094, But again, the amount that we've been tracking to keeping, especially with Robinhood and Palantir dropping, we're around $655 after 1 week. And so again, looking at the charts, this is what it all nets out to for the moment. And of course, this will make a lot more. This will be a lot more revealing as the weeks go by, and we can see how the averages are starting to take shape. Now, the next thing I wanted to look at was what are the trades for next week. So I'm going to come up here and we'll add in our week 2 here. I can get my machine to respond. There we go. And we should be able to see that as soon as it wakes up and does its thing. There we are. Now, what I need to do here is close these. So I'm going to mark this first week's activity as closed, and then come down here and make all of these active, and then we can see where we stand. So as we see here, we have generated $936. Is that correct? Let me just double check that we're looking at the right thing. Yes, $936 of new cash flow for week number 2. And of course, we'll see how much of that we keep as we go forward. And then when we look over here to the 30 delta, we'll do the same exercise here. We'll go up and add back in our week 2. Bear with me here while we get that enabled. And same exercise, we're going to close all of these and open up the next batch. See if I can spell active. That would be nice. All right, here we go. Now here you can see that we were assigned shares on both Robinhood and Palantir. So what I've done here is, in order for me to keep the closing option amount so that I can actually see the true profit that we earned in that week, instead of just marking this as 0, because of course we kept the full amount of premium that we were paid, I wanted to nevertheless say, okay, if we had sold it, we would have had to pay an additional $3.29 to close the contract. So what I did here is, instead of saying we were assigned at, of course, the 112 strike, as we can see here, what I said is, instead of just putting the 112 as the buy price, I made it the 112 minus the 329, because I didn't want to double count that loss. So essentially what we have now, we bought at 108.71 effectively, and right now the stock closed at roughly 108.16. So we're sitting at a slight negative, but of course that'll all shake out as we look at next week unfolds, essentially. Same deal with Palantir. So you can see that we've got our shares that we've been assigned. What I've done, of course, for Robinhood and for Palantir is I've now turned around and sold roughly midpoint between a 15 and a 30. In some cases, I might think it was a 25 delta call. So we actually are able to generate $1.15 and $1.70 for the shares that we now own and we're selling covered calls against. So we do have some cash flow that's been generated. And in fact, if we look at this, I'm going to just remove these dollar amounts for a second, because I want to get a good sense of the actual cash flow. The actual cash flow was $1,101 that we generated this week, or today rather, for next week's trades for the 30 delta weekly. And so with all of that said, we can now go here and look at our charts. And of course, the charts haven't changed, but we can see that our current situation shows us down a little bit for the 20 delta and the 30 delta going into next week. All of that will shake out as the week unfolds, and hopefully we get back to a profit position quickly for next week. And we'll see how our trend wheel accounts develop over the course of the week. So there we are. If you're following along, make sure that you're careful with what you're doing. If you don't fully understand this approach, I highly encourage you to do this through paper trading. Don't risk real money until you're 100% comfortable with what's going on here. Remember, none of this is financial advice. This is just what I'm doing personally. Your results may vary. Always trade at your own risk. Talk to you next week.